and I found this little cabin on Zillow for sale by owner. It had been on the market for a few months. We called up the owner. It took a while to get a hold of him. He just wasn't motivated to sell. Finally, I got to meet him in person, just got to really tell him our story. He had multiple offers and he accepted ours even though it was less.
And one of the things that I was really surprised to find out is that you're a preacher's wife.
We met on Christian Mingle. We met online. It was a very quick, we dated for 3 months and then got engaged for 3 months and were married 3 months later. And it was just one of those things when you know, you know.
On today's episode, we have Miss Emily Lefko, and I'm so excited to talk to her because not only is she a mom and a wife and this amazing entrepreneur for short-term rentals, she also has a business doing social media for people who have short-term rentals. So I'm excited to talk to her all about what that means exactly. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So Emily, I see your social media posts all the time and you do a really great job at it. How did you get good at that? Or did you go to school for it? Are you using Canva for everything? How are you pulling that off?
Yeah, thank you. So it really started probably back in 2015, and I started I've just, a born entrepreneur. My mind does not stop when it comes to new business ideas. And so the first idea was a mobile boutique. So I had this little camper that I was trying to sell clothes out of. And that's where I started with Instagram. I started posting about those clothes and, local events and things like that. And that was right when I had my first child. And it was just a lot. And I didn't know a lot about business. And so at that point, I shut that business down and I decided to go pursue my master's in business. So I got my MBA and learned a lot through that process. But honestly, after going to school for it, I've realized there's so much knowledge on YouTube and on, not to compare the two, but it's there's so much out there for free and for masterminds and things like that I'm almost man, I spent so much money on a higher education that I'm I feel like I could have learned it quicker and maybe more affordable. And so that's where I took that shift and I started learning more about business strategy and marketing. And I've always loved social media. When I was doing the boutique, I kind of leaned into that more. And then I started doing network marketing. So that's kind of where I started with social media and really getting out of my comfort zone. The idea of talking to the camera was so scary to me. But in the network marketing industry, you are around so many other women that are doing the same things that I was okay, I guess I'll try this out. It didn't feel as uncomfortable. So I'd say that's kind of how I got started with the social media side. With it, it was really network marketing that pushed me over the edge of ripping off that band-aid, getting out of your comfort zone, realizing, okay, I have these goals. And in order to get there, social media is a huge aspect to kind of open those doors for me. And to let people in, let them know who I am, know about our family and kind of share my story in that way. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it started.
So even though I've been making Instagram videos, I think 3 years now, and I still feel stupid, filming stuff in front of my mom or my husband or whatever. My mom stares at me the whole time and I'm like, stop looking at me. This is hard enough to do to begin with. So for
Yes.
people out there who really want to start posting on social media, as you listen to Emily and I want you to just take away that it doesn't necessarily it's not that we don't all feel dumb when we're trying to do it. You just get used to it. The more you film, and then you get to where you don't care because the more you help people online and the responses you get from them, you build your business. And then you start having the attitude of dude, I literally don't care because this is supporting my family and it's fun to me, but you still feel stupid doing it.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember making my husband leave the room. And even for this today, I was I'm in his office and I'm you got to leave. I'm starting because I don't want him to just stare at me. And so, yeah, it's so funny. I prefer doing videos and things in my own quiet time. where the kids aren't even in the, it's just, it's like so awkward at first, but you're right.
Well,
Like once
speaking
you,
on stage kinda
yeah,
works the same way. I can remember the first time I spoke on stage a long time ago, and my mom was at the conference I was speaking at, and I'm like, "You can't come in here, like, I need you to not be here. I know there's, like, 1,000 people
yes.
here, and I can talk to the 1,000 strangers, but if you're sitting in front of me, this is not
Uh-oh.
gonna be as easy."
Yeah.
She came anyway, and, like, it was fine, but it's even awkward, like, speaking on stage. It's kinda the same thing. So I definitely feel you on that. And so
Yeah.
anybody out there, just make the videos.
Yeah, that I experienced that. I had a speaking engagement last month, and Corey, my husband, he was like helping me do it and helping me walk through it, and that was fine. But then the actual day, I'm like, "You're not gonna be in there. Like, I don't want you to be in there." And he's like, "No, like I really want to see you." And so he snuck in, and it actually was totally fine. I think it helped my nerves, like just seeing that one supportive person back there. And he was like videoing me, so that was sweet. But yeah, it's so funny how like the people closest to us, it's just like more awkward.
I agree. And so
Yeah.
how did you transition from you started to learning about network marketing and doing some social media to investing in short-term rentals, and now you're expanding and, on the hunt for boutique hotels? Like, you've made a huge progress here. How'd you go from network marketing to real estate investor? That's a huge leap.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, network marketing was just like the biggest issue was you had to build a team. And for me, I hated the idea of like my success relying on other people's work efforts. And I continued to push and fight for it, like for probably 2 almost 3 years I was in it, and I'm like, I'm just not seeing the results I want because I'm doing all I can, but I'm not like able to build this team up. And as soon as I would start to build one, then like people would quit. And I'm like, I want to build something that's mine and that I have control over and that I can hire people to work with me and be my team that way. And so it was that shift of like, this just isn't for me. And it can be really hard when you've spent that much time and energy on something to take a step back and be like, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to like leave this completely. Um, it can feel like, did I just waste all that time? But I chose to look at it as like, I've learned so much through this experience. I've pushed out of my comfort zone so much that I'm taking everything I'm learning and have learned and going to put it into something else. And so that really helped me in that mindset. And then I would say I took about a year off just to try to figure out like, what is that next step for me? Like, what I had no clue. We do live really close to the Smoky Mountains, so I see all the cabin rentals. I thought, one day in the future that would be so cool to like own a cabin up there one day. But it just felt way far off. And then my dad, he has a lot of long term rentals, and me and him started talking about the cabin idea. And as soon as I had his like interest, I was like, oh, like maybe we could partner in this together. And like, he could be more the financial partner, I could be the sweat equity partner. Because I could see myself like doing all of that and like being the operator of it. And so we started looking, and I found this little cabin on Zillow for sale by owner. It had been on the market for a few months, and this was right before prices just started like increasing like crazy. So it was the only cabin under 300,000 at that time. And so we called up the owner, and like it took a while to get a hold of him. He just wasn't motivated to sell. It was like an old vacation rent home that they kind of didn't really use anymore. And finally, I got to meet him in person, just got to like really tell him our story and like, I want to do this with my dad and how special that would be. And we put in an offer, and he had multiple offers, and he accepted ours even though it was less, just because he got to meet me, and like I got to show him like a picture of our kids and just really paint that picture for him. And then the rest was history. I mean, we just like got to work on a 4-month renovation, and it's been doing really well for the last it's been operating now like a little over a year.
So I love your story because I feel like in the social media space, people all have this same story they want to tell. Meaning they have to have this like rags to riches story, or like I, you know, was homeless to get here, or like some like extreme story. And I think it's important that people hear, hey, I use one of my parents as my private money lender or my equity partner, or however you want to word it, because I feel like it's like people think you're not as reputable, or you didn't work as hard, or you didn't try as hard if you have a parent who helped you with something. But in reality, your parents usually want you to prove something to them and have higher expectations of you than someone else might. And it's okay for your parents to be your equity partner and to say that out loud and admit it. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, I don't know why that gets like this bad rap in our space.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like my dad, he was an attorney. And so, like, even though we're family, like we still were very, like, we had a contract, we just wanted to make sure everything was done, like, in case one of us forgot what we had originally, committed to. And it was very professionally done. And it was very specific on, like, this is your role, this is my role, and this is how it's going to operate. And, like, when it comes down to selling and, like, if I'm going to buy him out eventually, like how that's going to work. There's just so many different things that we outlined. And it gave me so much experience to be like, I know this was my dad and we already had that built in relationship. But if I can do a really great job and showcase my operation side and the hospitality side, then I can go show this and go get another private money lender and partner in that way. Um, so it really was like a great entrance into getting started with investing. um, but everybody has something that somebody else doesn't have, and you have to figure out like what is it that you can leverage to get into the game, and then use that as like your resume to start investing in other ways.
And this is such a great thing that people need to hear, because a lot of times I feel like people meet at conferences, or they meet at a meetup or wherever it is, and they're like, oh, let's be partners. And like, you totally don't know this person at all. Like, maybe you talked to them for a little bit at a conference and they decide to be partners. They don't have this really great like agreement in place. Maybe they have a verbal agreement, and partnerships go really, really bad. And then they get this bad reputation from that, not the person, but the partnerships in general. And so the way you've done this with your dad, since he was an attorney, you have like a great foundation of, okay, we need this spelled out, we need this spelled out. And it doesn't matter if it's your dad or your cousin or your sister or your best friend or some random person you met at a conference, you still need this really specific spelled out agreement. And I've had enough partnerships to know that it's not just for the legal purposes of it. It's so that you continue to get along. Because when you're moving forward and you're like, well, when we made this original agreement, this is what you agreed to, is easier than a fight back and forth of he said, she said, or whatever. So I think it's a huge piece of information for the listeners to take away, that they need this agreement in place to have any type of partnership.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say too, like I mean, it can go bad no matter what, but I do feel like it's important that you kind of know the person and their personality, and to know their strengths, their weaknesses, and are you a good match? Because, a great partnership, if you both have the same strengths, same weaknesses, it's not going to work well, because you're going to be like fighting for, those things. So for my dad and I, like, it really has worked out so well. And it makes me want to find my next partner to make sure that they're similar to my dad, in the fact that he's a lot more, conservative in his risk taking, and he's very numbers and just like comes back to reality. And like for me, I'm more a big picture, like design, and like I can see things, but I need that person to kind of be like, okay, can we do this but maybe on a smaller budget, and like bring it back down to earth.
I love that. And
Yeah.
so, changing directions a little bit, I remember meeting you at our last retreat, and one of the things that I was really surprised to find out is that you're a preacher's wife.
Yeah.
And so
So
how does that play into your investing? Because I think like when you meet a preacher's wife, you think of like this supportive role to their husbands whose life kind of revolves around like raising their kids and like supporting their husband at the church and like that old southern tradition of what you think of like a preacher's wife, as opposed to this like powerful successful businesswoman who owns real estate.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. Like when Corey and I met, we met on Christian Mingle.
Oh, I love that.
So we met online, and then it was a very quick, like we dated for 3 months and then got engaged for 3 months, and we're married 3 months later. So it was very quick, and it was just one of those things like when you know, you know. And I knew that he was wanting to be in ministry, but like I still, it never clicked to me like, oh, I could be like a preacher's wife, that just never, I just have always seen us as Corey and Emily, and like even today, like I try not to label myself necessarily, like not in a bad way, but I'm Emily, I'm not, um, I don't want people to feel like when you meet them, sometimes when Corey's like, yeah, I'm a pastor, they immediately like kind of they regret things they just said or something. They feel like they have to be on their best behavior, and we like don't want that. Like we want to build relationships with people and like not scare them away, especially like non-believers. And so even for my kids too, I've always heard like preachers kids can be really rebellious, and it's like I don't want them to be preachers kids. I want them to be Kate, Judah, and Claire, and have their own identity in that, and in Christ, not this role. And so I think that has helped me realize like I love being a part of the church. I love serving. I love helping Corey in any way he needs. But it's also like I also have this other stuff that goes on, and I'm always trying to think of my business like how can I show up as just a representative of Christ, and how can I show that in my business as I'm like walking it out daily in not just in church life but in my regular life. So yeah, I definitely have gotten people like at the retreat, they were like, what, you're a preacher's wife? I'm like, yeah, like to me it's just normal, that's just what my husband does, and like that's how we love to serve and like be a part of it.
And so it's interesting because on Instagram, I typically share like whatever our service was about on Sunday when we've gone to church, or like I'm not like quiet talking about it. I'm definitely not, I don't have an account for like learning about Christianity or anything like that.
Yeah.
But like it's clear that like we're Christians and we go to church and I raise my family that way. And it's interesting how judgmental people become on Instagram because of that. One time I posted a picture of me and the kids at the beach. You could only see from like here up. I had a whole piece bathing suit on from like here up. And like I we literally lost 2,000 followers from people being like, a Christian woman wouldn't post this, blah blah blah. And like other Instagram people are like in a string bikini that doesn't have their anything on their butt and like like posing really sexy and no one says anything. But because I post that regularly, they're like, Christian women shouldn't behave this way. And like it becomes this really judgmental thing. I've
Oh,
also noticed
yeah.
that people have some really strong opinions on how they think Christians should behave, like with money, that like being successful monetarily or what they should do with their money just because you're a Christian. Have you experienced any of that?
Yes, like and I've definitely had those thoughts of like I guess we are called to be like set apart, and so I'm mindful of that, but then the judgmental things, it's like you have to just be okay with like your what you're doing, and like is it in alignment with God, and if that, like, then you just have to let the outside noise go. And that's what I've learning and still learning of like, okay, it doesn't really matter what these people are saying or thinking. Like, what does God say about this, and how is He viewing this? And just making sure that that's a priority. But it's sad because I do feel like Christians tend to like be a little bit more judgmental on that side of things, instead of just being like, okay, they're choosing to put their life on social media, and they're showing all of that, and like there's things that they probably do in private that they're not sharing, and it's like just trying to think of it that way. Like, would you want somebody commenting or, doing those things on your account? Like, no, so don't do it to other people.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like my account is so freaking conservative to begin with, and they just find any little thing to make those comments or send those messages about. And sometimes I realize that like I'm not doing anything that I'm not supposed to be, but the part that I always try and remember is our goal is to bring these people to Jesus, right? And so if I'm giving them negative thoughts and opinions, like that's not helping with bringing them to Jesus. So like trying to balance that mix between a lot of the people who follow me might not
Yeah.
be Christians. Like where's that balance of, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I think I think it's like trying to figure out just like what I said, like taking it to the Lord of like, okay, I'm gonna be me, and just try, like in social media especially. I think that's what's so hard is that comparison of everybody else, and you have to like it's a daily reminder, like, is this me? Like, be authentic to who you are, because not only like in our faith, but even in our businesses, like that shines through of like, are you being authentic to you, and like you're not following the crowd and trying to compare yourself and be like somebody else. And so I think it's just like you said, finding that balance of like sharing and being open and vulnerable, but like also none of us are perfect, so we are. And that happens in church all the time. Like, people get church hurt and they leave the church, and they are just leaving it because of what people have done. And it's like, none of us, like anybody on staff, like nobody is perfect. And so you have to go to church for that community of other sinners. Like, nobody is, free of sin. And it's like, we're community together, but we're serving God who is perfect. And so he's not going to let you down. People will, no matter what. And so it's like, we just have to find that balance of being okay with like showing up authentically as ourselves, and like hoping and praying that it's delivered the right way to the right people.
Okay, so you're this successful real estate investor. You're running your social media business related to people who have short-term rentals. You're a mom of 3 kids, you're a preacher's wife, you're all of these different things. What do you do for fun?
Oh gosh. So my kids are 2, 4, and 6 right now. And so I would say our fun is doing traveling things. Like, we live really close to Dollywood, so we have season passes. We love going to Dollywood. We also have this thing called mall days, and like on Fridays, we'll go to the mall and just like people watch and eat at the food court, and like that's our little family time. And then my husband and I, we just love date nights. Like, we'll just go to a restaurant and just have that quiet time and actually get to have a conversation in quiet. And so I would say right now that's my things for fun.
And so it's interesting to hear you say that because when I'm being interviewed, people always ask me things about hobbies. And in this phase of life, pregnant with my 5th child, running a couple businesses, I'm kind of in the same boat. My husband and I go to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. We have our date night once a week. And the rest of it is just trying to enjoy the process of having little kids. Because if we're totally honest, having this many little kids is tough. Like, it comes with its challenges every day. And going out and having these big adventures every day doesn't happen because you're still in this phase. You have nap times, probably. You might be slightly getting out of that, but trying to feed everybody and people get tired, like going on these giant adventures all the times and these big vacations that you see that people on Instagram do and they think of as their fun things isn't always that fun with little kids. And so there's something to be said about, and my husband and I were just talking about this, learning to love the process, because we talk about that in our businesses, that you can't just want like the outcome of like, I want this amazing Airbnb that makes a ton of money. You can't just want the ton of money. You have to enjoy the process on some level, or you're going to burn out and be really unhappy and likely not be successful. And I think the same thing applies for our families. You have to learn to enjoy and appreciate the process of the everyday, whether it's the making dinner or the bath times and reading them a story at night. Like learning to be in the moment and appreciate those things, I think is part of where we're at.
Yeah, definitely. And right now we are homeschooling, and so I'm loving like just the flexibility that gives our family. And my husband, he's off on Fridays, and so that's just an extra day that we get to spend together. And like you said, like enjoying that process is really, because it's my 3-year-old, she's the one that gives us a run for our money, and that is always like, oh my gosh, like I think we're done having kids right now. And but it's like enjoying that they're only going to be this little right now, and it's going by so fast, and we're just trying to soak it in. And there's been so many times where they're doing something and we're like, no, you don't need to be doing that, and then we kind of catch ourselves, and it's like, they're 4, and they're kids, and like just let them do that like for a minute, like it's not going to hurt anybody. And just having that focus of like this is just for a moment, and soaking up these precious moments.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned homeschooling, which I do also. And I'm curious, what curriculum are you using for the kids?
So it's mainly just kindergarten. I mean, I'm doing kind of pre-K for my son and then kindergarten, but for my daughter, and we're doing the good and the beautiful.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. So, I've done Abeka for I feel like a million years because I was also homeschooled through Rebecca. So it just feels like we've had
Oh,
Abeka forever.
yeah.
And for those of you who don't know anything about homeschool curriculum, the difference in Abeka is it's through Pensacola Christian College. It's accredited, and you have a pretty rigid program that has to be done every day. The kids are watching videos, you mail off homework. They even have to, for their reading score, they have to call and read a specific book to a recording, and the school grades their reading, which is great because everything's planned out for you and you know exactly what you need to do. It's accredited, so they get a report card, they'll get a high school diploma at the end. But it takes away a little bit of the freedom that you get with homeschooling. So we're going to Florida has their statewide homeschool conference in, I think it's in 3 weeks. So we're going to go, and there's a huge, kind of like when you go to a real estate conference, how there's vendors of different things that real estate investors might need. There's a huge expo center with all the different types of curriculum. So we're going to go through and try and pick a curriculum because I'm finding that my kids are spending so many hours on a screen when they have their schoolwork all related to that also. So I really want something that has less screen time and isn't so rigid.
Yeah, we've really loved. I mean, it's our first year, but we've loved the good and the beautiful curriculum. A lot of people like in my community use it and recommended it, and we do like an umbrella program with another Christian school here, so we report like attendance and grades there. And then I really wanted, like, I know people have different opinions on this, but I wanted um our kids to like be tested, like and have the test just to help me know like okay, they're at where they need to be. So I think that'll start in first grade, but she'll have like her yearly exam to make sure that she's like past this grade or whatever. And to me it's just like a great checkpoint, like okay, yes, we're on the right page.
So it'll be interesting to see if you still think that in a few years. Because I started out thinking the same way. That's why my oldest is 12. So we're doing sixth grade this year. And when we first started, I thought the same thing. I'm like, well, you have to have tests in other parts of life. Like you need to like be at a certain place. And the longer I've gone on with it, I have 3 kids who are old enough now so we've got first grade, third grade, and sixth grade. I don't think I want that anymore. And what's really happened with that is over the last, let's say 6 months, they've had so much screen time and that we're so like hustling and focused on getting school finished. I feel like we're not focusing as much on like, I want them to grow up to be good people. And a lot of people are going to give me tons of mean comments for this, but growing up to be good people is more important on my list than what their test score is. Because I know a lot of really smart people who are total assholes, and that is not the goal. And so we have taken a step back. I think we're probably at like 5 weeks now with no screens. And it's a complete like 360, 180, however you say that. I think I want them to be a 180 because then they go the other direction, right?
Yeah.
on how like my son, for example, behaves not having so much screen time. And so I'm really in a place where I'm trying to like think that through. How much of that like traditional school structure do I want them to have versus like them getting to be little kids because they have their whole lives to be tested and stress out about whatever life brings them. And like first grade shouldn't be that.
Yeah, no, I see both sides of it for sure. And I think maybe with The Good and the Beautiful, it is so laid back and it's very right now it's been minimal screen time, minimal like stress at all. And so that's where I'm like, it'd be okay to add one test in here, you know, a year. I know at Becca, we've looked at that before, and it is a lot more like I would say intense than The Good and the Beautiful. So I think there's like that give and take of like you got to figure out your rhythm and then but yeah, exactly. I want my kids to enjoy their childhood and like get to play more and cook more and like teach them how to do their chores and teach them how to like make eye contact with strangers and say thank you and purchase things at the stores by themselves and like we're really focusing on those life skills early on and like making them, you know, good citizens of our community.
Well, and it's interesting too because as you become an adult, especially an entrepreneur, you're like, dude, I didn't need to know about the War of 1812, but I definitely needed to know about like balancing a checkbook and filing taxes. Like, I think
Yes.
some of the priorities are a little off on
Yep.
like what we're learning. So you're right. I would like for them to learn a few more of those life skills than just like so rigidly focusing on like things that you're not like, for example, Arabella right now is learning about all these different provinces and islands in Canada. And I'm like, do you know that we have territories in the United States? She's like, no. I'm like, maybe we need to know the US
Yeah.
territories before we learn all the parts of Canada. Like, not that like learning the parts of Canada isn't like something that she can do, but like let's learn, especially with us living in Florida and a lot of that stuff being close to us. And we have people who live here who are from those places. Like, let's learn about those US territories first.
Well, that's what's so special about homeschool is like we get to make sure we're like preparing them specifically like our kids. Like it's not, you know, a huge classroom that like I understand they have to teach their main things to everybody, but for us we get to like take our kids and like individually focus on like their interest and like really go deeper into like what they're enjoying. Like my daughter, she's 6 and already playing chess and for she just likes it and her brain is like working with that and so we're like okay like let's do chess lessons and let's add this, you know, if we were in traditional school and like all of that I just don't think we would have the time
And
to.
so that's how I'm feeling with Becca because when we were doing like kindergarten and first grade, Arabella was obsessed with outer space. So I got to give her all this supplemental stuff that was super fun learning about outer space, right? But now that we're in sixth grade, I say we, I'm definitely not in sixth grade. um, she has so much to do that it's taking, you know, from morning to early afternoon. And I'm like, there is no time left. Sure, I can pick some books for her to read and things like that. So I'm really excited to find a curriculum with a little less so that we can add in some more of that supplemental
Yes,
stuff.
yeah, definitely, I love that.
Well, Emily, it's been so nice talking to you today. Thank you for sharing your story with us. For those of you who want to find Emily, she does a great job on social media. Where can they find you?
I would say I'm most active on Instagram and it's just Emily at Emily Lethgo.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah,
Emily. I appreciate you being here
yeah,
today.
thank you.